Hey guys, Blue Velvet here. This is going to be a introduction video to Crohn's disease. Um, it's not going to be incredibly complicated or overly long. I'm just going to cover a few points, and then if anybody wants to go further with that, they can leave comments or questions or what have you. Um, as stated, my stream name on Twitch is Blue Velvet. I'll leave links to things when I talk about them, like my Twitch link and any other links that are relevant to this particular video about Crohn's. Um, Crohn's disease is an autoimmune disease, a lot like Lyme disease or AIDS or something, any autoimmune disease really, MD, MS, name your autoimmune disease. There's plenty of them out there. They all suck. Um, Crohn's does something very similar to AIDS. I'm not making a comparison to the two diseases in any shape where I'm saying one is the other or the other one is the other. They're not. They're two different things. They do different things, but they're very similar in what they do. Uh, they tell healthy red blood cells in your body to attack other healthy red blood cells in your body in any soft tissue in your entire body. That pretty much means everything except your bones. so, so that being said, I've had this since I was born, 46 years now. I have been in the hospital that whole time, but it didn't become potentially fatal until 2000. So for the last 14 years, it's been a roller coaster ride of near fatal things that have happened, like organ failure and various things like that. Ranging from all sorts of things from, say, acute pancreatitis to severe iron anemia, clogged biliary ducts, strictures, intestinal ulcers, something they might call ulcerative colitis, also called UC. Pretty much means you have ulcers in your intestines, which is another horrific disease. Sucks. Uh, in the last 14 years, I've had probably more than 70 plus ER visits, probably stayed in the hospital at least 1 week or more per year, depending on the surgeries. So you learn a lot about hospitals, how they work. You learn a lot about staff, what they go through on the inside. Because, what you go through on the outside is completely different than the life inside the hospital. If you live inside the hospital, because just going and having surgeries and those kind of things isn't the only thing you have to do. You have to have, there's a lot of tests that have to be done ahead of time, and procedures, following those usually. So there are scans, and those often require setup, which can require weeks or months of time, and once those are done, it can take weeks or months of time for results. Once those are back, they may or may not show answers, and you may have to start all over. Or if they do, you move on to the next step, which could be a procedure, which could take again, it's a circle, weeks or months. It could be, and then eventually you could end up in surgery, and you lose sections of your intestines and whatever else you lose. They'll remove whatever is destroyed or inflamed, gallbladders, thyroids, saliva glands, you name it. I mention these things too because I've had them removed. I have a multitude of surgical scars. I think I've had about 7 surgeries in the last 14 years. I've had approximately 15 or so near-death experiences, 3 of which are documented. with the hospital. The rest I chalk up because they misdiagnosed organ failure for about 6 years, and I had about 30 different attacks during those 6 years. Which, when I say organ failure, I mean, heart failure is organ failure, pancreas is organ failure. If any organ fails to work, death could be imminent overnight. And when you look back now and you think about 30 attacks and, lasting up to like 7, 8, or 9 hours of screaming in the ER, and, I won't go too deep into how the ER works and what they do, because I'll say this about the ER. The ER is an emergency room. If you have an emergency, that's the place to go. That makes perfect sense. If you sometimes have a lifelong disease and some of the symptoms you recognize aren't necessarily emergencies, but you got to get it taken care of in the next couple of days or a week or so, ER might not be the place for you. I'm just saying, because you have a very specialized thing and you're being treated by a specialist already, it depends on your situation. You should know. You should know how you feel inside, and you should know if you need to go to the ER. Don't go to the ER just because you're stubborn or silly or stupid. You don't go to the ER if it's not an emergency. Okay? Plenty of people who have all sorts of illnesses, from diabetes to whatever it is. Large take your pick, high cholesterol, all sorts of things that can manage their symptoms on their own at home and rarely need to go to the hospital. Sometimes they do. Depends on your level of illness. Like asthma, for example. There are just different levels of, say, asthma. There are different levels of Crohn's. There's mild, there's severe, there's moderate, and it just depends on what you go through. Symptoms I'll go over real quick for Crohn's. Like I said before, since it's I probably didn't say this. This is important to note. I noted that it was an autoimmune disease, that red blood cells eat red blood cells, which means your body's eating itself, essentially. It's eating its own organs. It's fighting healthy tissue, trying to kill healthy tissue. Silly Crohn's. But here, inside the symptoms thing, I should also mention bacteria plays a huge role as well, because when you are autoimmune with Crohn's, you are also auto-balanced or out of balance, bacterially speaking. You have to be extremely careful what you eat. Extremely. And if you have this illness, or IBD, or UC, or IBS, or any other stomach-related or GI illness, you know this already. You know this. You've learned this. You must be very careful. And it's a selective process. It takes years for you to find a diet appropriate for you, because you may read books like we all do. We all probably all bought books. Look, real quick in the background, just for you guys, I put in the background, Crohn's disease. What is it? You should die. That's for you guys. But I have other links up here, up on the browser. You can't see it. My finger can't really point to it, but whatever. That are up there. I'm going to actually show you that are incredibly valuable links later. But back to the symptoms. And we're talking about being bacterially challenged. That can open you up to all sorts of potentially fatal bacterial situations. When you're talking about bacterial, you're talking about killer diseases. C. diff comes to mind, which is a abbreviation for Clostridium difficile, however they pronounce it. You may have heard of this with old people in old housing situations, because bacteria is all over the bed rails and stuff, and those facilities overall have trouble. I shouldn't say all of them, but I've heard stories. That's how it gets passed. It also gets passed in the hospital. You can get in the hospital off bed rails there too. Weaker you are bacterially balanced inside, the more open you will be to bacterial infections. So similar to AIDS, If a person with a cold comes into your environment, you are not just open to that cold, you're open to the extreme version of that cold because you have no defenses. You are autoimmune. You have nothing to fight it. Nothing's coming to save you from bad viruses, bad bacteria. It's going to thrive unless you take particular medications. I'll get into that in a second. Symptoms can range from head to toe. Since it's an inflammation, that means your eyeballs all the way down to your toes. One eye might be inflamed, red, swollen, tearing all the time. You might, a tear duct might seal for no reason. An eye might stop working. A cataract might stop working. You might get a swollen saliva gland in the side of your mouth, or a big chunk that's swollen on your face here. Just this giant chunk of thing in your neck. And they may at first think, oh, let's go take that out. But in reality, it's just inflammation. It's just always going to be there. And it moves. It just all over the place. It can, it can cause, you can see bacterial infections in your mouth. If you have a bacterial infection, you'll see it, on your tongue, your lips, etc. If you have an internal infection, an external one will be very obvious. Internal will be very obvious as well. If it's inside your mouth, it gets really bad, like say yeast overgrowth, which is another bacteria you can get. H. pylori, another bacteria you can get. There's so many, it's ridiculous. I'm not going to go into the list. I'm not saying you have to live in a bubble, but you need to be aware of germs. You need to be aware of bacteria if you want to stay healthy. That's it. You're going to want to take care of your hands, get some bacterial soap, wipe things down. Every time you go to the store and you grab a cart and you walk around, you're grabbing whatever germs from the billion people before you that reached in and touched that cart. You touch your face, you touch your mouth, whatever. Just come on now. I don't know what to tell you. It's just, you're just going to have to carry some wipes. You're going to have to be like Monk. Let's see. What kind of life can you expect based on having this illness? Depending on the severity and the person you are, I'll go that far and say that, because I know some very strong people who've gone through a lot, but continue to move forward in ways that I cannot. And sometimes I feel weaker for it, knowing that someone's gone through something more than I have, and it, for some reason, is accomplishing more. Sometimes I don't. That's something that's another thing I'll deal with later, emotional tolls and physical tolls. But we're talking about what kind of life can you expect. You have to keep a schedule, a journal almost. You're going to have to arrange your diet. You'll know what you can and can't eat. It's pretty simple. If it hurts, stop eating it. Okay? Start with an elimination process. Start over again. Start simple. Start with some chicken and noodles and water and stuff, and then introduce something slowly over time that you want to eat. And see if that works out. And if it does, keep adding things. There are certain things that should just be no-nos across the board, but they're not true for everybody. Caffeine, sugar, processed food, fast food. I say processed food and fast food like they're two different things. They are two different things and one thing. But processed food can be found at the supermarket, and processed food can also be found in fast food places. If it's processed, it's filled with chemicals, and usually in a plant that may or may not be clean, and has gone through many different human hands, and trucks, and traveling, and farms. And I'm just saying, you may, if you can afford it, want to consider going organic, farm fresh near your house. There's usually a market near you, like an Elliott's or a Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, which I think closed. Actually, come think of it, I think that no, it was it Sprouts before? Now it's Whole Foods. I think Whole Foods bought Sprouts. I can't. It's confusing, but there's a lot of there's always usually almost always an organic store, and you know, and the timing of when you eat and what you eat, that can all make a difference, and that's just something you have to figure out kind of on your own. That's a big part of your life. The other part is pain. Pain is a huge part of it. You're always in pain 24/7. It really never stops. And when I say that, I mean it can be anywhere and everywhere and multiple places. Because you have this illness, this autoimmune disease, or because you have any autoimmune disease, you're open to other, not just bacterial infections or viruses, you're open to other diseases. So you can actually catch other diseases that are lifelong and incurable. You are open to osteoporosis. You are open to rheumatoid arthritis. You are open to thyroid disease, heart disease, cancer. Stop me before I go on. It's a large list of things you're open to. You're probably going to get some of these. I have 4 or 5. Fibromyalgia, that's another one. Chronic pain syndrome, hypervisceral sensitivity. There's a lot of different things that can happen because of surgeries, because of procedures that will create a nerve damage, which is perfect on its own. Anybody who has nerve damage knows. If you have nerve damage, you know what I'm talking about. So the pain is a big deal. You're going to have to take a lot of medication for that. There are a lot of TMI issues because it's intestinal. How can I say this? The bulk of your problems are going to be intestinal because everything you eat has to go through inflamed from here all the way down. It has to go through inflamed territory, and it's not going to process correctly. And if your organs aren't correctly working, they're not going to process it correctly, which is going to create an effect of like eating pointy rocks. It's going to be like getting stabbed repeatedly over and over in the intestines for anywhere from 3 to 24 hours. It just depends on what you ate, who you are, the case, the situation, your situation, the severity of the illness. So you spend a lot of time dealing with the process of food through your body, and that's incredibly that's a whole different schedule. It's incredibly difficult, and that's why I bring back to the food eating schedule. You can only eat certain times, and you can't eat other times because you can't afford the amount of time required maintenance-wise for food to process. So you need to process as much food as, well, I do. I need to process as much food as I can in a shorter period of time. If I try to process food over a longer period of time, it costs me longer when that process is ending, so to speak. The other thing is you may or may not, on the severity of your illness, spend a significant amount of time at the hospital. And this is just because you're going to have problems all the time, and you really need to take them seriously, and you need to have them looked at because you have a serious illness. It can kill you left unchecked. So, that can involve anything from blood tests to X-rays to MRIs to drinking things to having to stay overnight for things in the hospital to surgeries and etc. So your life will be pretty full. It'll be 24/7, all about staying alive. Which should probably take me to medication real quick. Typically, you're going to take anti-inflammatories. There are quite a few out there. Anything from Humira to Remicade to steroids like prednisone. The list is so long. It's not that long. I mean, maybe 10 different drugs ultimately you can take as anti-inflammatories. But your GI will know them all and will tell all of them to you and give you a list. I've been on all of them, and some worked better than others and some didn't. But that depends on your body, your chemistry, and how it works out for you. So you can't get too frustrated if something doesn't work right away, and you don't want to get super excited if something works, right away and then starts to go downhill later. These things happen too. They're called, it's like being in remission or having a flare. You go through periods where you might get better, you might get worse. It's very common to drop 30 pounds in a month and to gain 30 pounds in a month. Very common, because if you get sick, you can't even eat. You'll drop weight drastically. But if they put you on a lot of drugs, you will eat food. And I'm talking about like steroids. Steroids will make you want to eat. And I'm not talking about athlete steroids. I'm talking about, anti-inflammatory steroids. There's a lot of other medications that may or may not be required. So many, because you might have so many other illnesses that it wouldn't be possible to discuss all of them. But they don't all have to be physical. Some of them might be emotionally based. Because you're dealing with something potentially fatal every day of your life. Some people might argue that. But if you talk to enough people who have Crohn's, or you live with it, you know what the truth is. Here currently in the U.S., we're just catching up to this illness. It affects millions of people, and really no one kind of knows about it. Tell you the truth, people say, "Oh, Crohn's, isn't that where you go to the bathroom a lot or something?" And I'm like, "Oh, wow, no, that's where your organs fail and you almost die." But close. Well, yeah, in like the most mild of cases, it can start that way, but it can get infinitely worse fast, or it could always stay mild, or you go into remission forever, or you could be sick forever. I mean, it's totally random. Depends on who you are and what you're going through. Okay, so medication is really based on all of that stuff and talking to your specialists. So, trial and error, a lot of trial and error. The emotional toll, physical toll. I'll start with the physical toll real quick. There's going to be a huge physical toll because you're not going to be able to do the things physically you did before. Because you're so sick. Just moving is difficult. And I think just by saying that, just moving, taking steps, walking, hurts. Wearing clothes hurts. Okay? And if you are taking, say, 20 plus medications a day, they all have some infinite side effects, which can create symptoms of their own, which will mirror the symptoms you have from the disease, which will amplify what you're going through. Make your skin crawl, make you itch, make you break out in rashes, and open to other infections, things of that nature. So physically speaking, it's quite debilitating. You can become bedbound. You have to fight that. You have to try very hard to establish some kind of routine. You got to keep moving. It's important to move. Lying still is the worst thing you can really do for this type of illness. Because things are processing through your body, they need to process through as naturally as possible, and that really requires your body to be in some form of movement. Not all the time, but as much as you can. Do laundry, do some cleaning around the house, do something to try to take your mind off the pain if you can. If you can't, you can't. No, nobody's gonna. I'm not gonna blame you. That's for sure. The emotional toll can be quite large as well. It's just there's so many factors involved. From going to, let's just say that you had a daytime job and that maybe you ran a side business on the side, or did even more or less. Who knows? It doesn't matter. You went places. You went to dinner. You went out with friends. You had family get-togethers. You went to barbecues. You celebrated holidays and birthdays and etc. All that changes when you become disabled, sick. You can barely leave the house. So, you lose all that. You lose touch with a lot of people. And over time, those people lose touch with you. And some of it might be for one reason, some it might be for another reason, some it might be for no reason at all. But, excuse me, over time, the list of people you know becomes shorter and shorter because you can't do the things that those people did anymore, and you can't go to see them or do things with them anymore. It's a little different if you're in a relationship. I've been in a relationship for 16 years. The first 6 years of that relationship, my illness was under control to some extent. The last 10 years or so have been really, really bad. So, my fiance then, at the time, turned into more of a girlfriend situation because when you're disabled, if you get married, her money counts against your disability, so you won't qualify for certain things. So you actually can't get married if you're disabled for various reasons, depending on your situation. I mean, but she barely, she has a job. We have a small house. We're very lucky and blessed in many ways. And again, I'm talking about the emotional toll. For instance, I got free medical care from the state because I'm disabled, so that's a blessing. We got a special purchase for this house because we're so poor. If you make under a certain amount of money, you got some kind of deal back then, and you got really dirt cheap houses, but it's a very nice house, great neighborhood, very clean. I live in a California suburb, so it's very quiet, docile place here. Not much happens. But living with knowing all the things you know and all the organs that have failed and all the pain you've already gone through and all the pain you're probably going to go through and the pain you are going through and seeing how it affects the people around you and the one closest to you if you're in a relationship with somebody, that can take a toll on you, knowing or thinking that you are the sole reason or responsibility to somebody else being there. What would life be like if you were healthy? There's so many different questions you're constantly asking yourself. But that's outside the realm of your control anymore. You have to try to deal with what's inside the realm of your control. And now it's just a different lifestyle, if you will, because you have no choice. Okay, and if your partner stays with you, that's great. That's wonderful. If they don't, that's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. Some people can't deal with it. At the current point in time, I have no real life friends. 0. No. Maybe 1, actually. I think I have one left of the 13 or 14 I've known since college. But you're not supposed to know everybody from college for life. But anyway, that's because they didn't all move on at once. They've all moved on over time, slowly. And most of my family I don't see. I don't see any of my family really. seen my family in a long time. I did go to a Christmas gathering recently and got to see all of them, but it's the first time I've seen them in like 6 years, actually. Because I'm currently taking a medication. This is all part of the emotional toll thing. And you start taking a medication and it starts to work a little bit in a certain direction, makes you feel a little bit better. You could do a couple more things you could do before, and you're like, oh, maybe I'm onto something here. So you're always hopeful in those scenarios, you know. So right now, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. I'm starting to feel a little better. I mean, I've been bedbound for the last 5 years. The last 9 months, I've been dealing with something called colitis, which has been a colossal nightmare. I won't bother going into the details of it. So I think, you know, you can see how it can be emotionally tolling on you, physically tolling. The drugs themselves that you take will eat your body. Steroids alone will eat your bones. Many of the other drugs will cause all sorts of things like arthritis and various things. So that's part of the physical toll. I guess I could ask people. Some people might wonder about learning to cope with being sick all the time. I think I said it earlier. You don't have a choice, and over time you'll actually get used. You'll get used to it. I know it sounds weird, but that's true. Anybody with any kind of lifestyle gets used to that lifestyle. Some of the links that I want to show you, though, are really some key information if you want to know about the illness. And then I'm going to leave it at that, okay? One of the first places that I recommend going is when you want to know the truth about an illness, not what you read on a website selling a fake medication that's never going to heal you, or some government outdated article 30 years old about the illness. You want to go to a place called healingwell.com, which is right here. Okay? That's what it looks like. Healingwell.com. And they have a tremendous amount of illnesses listed. And if you look at the numbers here of how many posts there are, Crohn's disease by far doubles all of the other illnesses here. That's crazy. It's a crazy number. That's a crazy number. But this is one spot you can go. The other spot that I would recommend is called the www.crohnsforum.com. Another place you can go where they'll not just talk about Crohn's, they'll talk about IBD and IBS and things of that nature, anything pretty much gastrointestinal. Another good place. Lots of information here, lots of people telling their stories, talking about what works and doesn't work for them. The Crohn's Zone .org. Crohn's Zone, just like it's spelled here, but without the apostrophe. This is another great site with a tremendous amount of medical information and forums with patient stories and all that kind of stuff. And one place that is not necessarily an information website about illness, but is an information site about medications, is called askapatient.com. This is a place, whenever you get assigned a medication, you want to go here to the search engine, you want to type in your medication, you want to find it off the list, we'll just pick one, and you'll see Effexor, that's a common one on TV. It's got over 2,000 people that made ratings. It's only got a 3.1 out of 5, which, is, 62% success rate? So, and in here you can read all the side effects and comments and what dosages and how long they were on it and any drug you want to know about. It's going to be here. So that's about what I'm going to say about Crohn's for now. You deal with it. And if you can somehow, return the favor of knowledge to other sick people, get them talking, working together, or at least just commiserating together. Maybe you've accomplished something. I don't know. I hope so. Anyway, everybody take care. I'm going to leave this as the podcast for the Crohn's section as the introduction. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. And again, there's a lot of things I didn't cover, or maybe I stumbled over, or you might have questions or comments about. Just put them under the YouTube thing, and I will be happy to comment on any of them. Thank you. Everybody, take care. Okay? Peace to everybody. Thank you. Goodbye.